everybody. Good afternoon. Just if you're in the UK.
Yeah.
We just need to
I believe you only had a little bit.
mute everybody. Right. So welcome to this, the first of the ASC's webinar series. It's incredibly distracting as everybody's pinging in because we've got over 200 people registered for this this webinar on the theme of AI. My name is Rick Mounfield. I am a director at the ASC. I'm also chartered security professional and a director at Optimal Risk Group. Today, this is not my specialist subject. So what we want to do is bring in the specialists, and I'm really pleased to introduce you to Andy Tollinton and Callum Doran from Serve. They have a presentation which I think you will find fascinating. We do, however, want your engagement. We want your questions, but we want you to keep them to the end, and then we're going to do a Q&A session later on. So without further ado, I always like to explain to everybody, Andy, Callum, a little bit about you as to why we should be listening to you as the experts. And so why don't we start with you, Andy? Tell us a little bit about yourself and the business.
Sure. Hi, everybody. And hello, Rick and one and all. My name is Andrew Tollinton. I'm from a company called Serve. And we've been working with data in the security space for over 15 years now. My brother and I founded the business back in 2010. And the business was focused back then on things called mobile apps. So nowadays, everything is AI, but there was a time when everything was app. Have you got an app for that? We've been working with decision trees and rule-based decision making ever since then. And of course, with the explosion of the internet and the volume of data, artificial intelligence is now something that our organization applies regularly. Our aim as a business is to help make businesses more resilient. In other words, to anticipate, manage and recover from incidents and business interruption. And we regularly apply artificial intelligence to help our clients achieve that end.
Super. And Callum, you're kind of a bit of a unicorn in this this group. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I studied maths and statistics at university and then got my master's degree in data science from Newcastle University. I've been working at Serve for about 4 years now as the lead data scientist. So as Andy said, previously it was a lot about mobile apps. And then as well, I'd say before the sort of AI sort of really started to hit the headlines, we realized that there was going to be a big space. We work with a lot of data. So I came in to really start to deploy these AI systems and utilize all that data to its best ability.
Yeah, super. And I think this is why, you know, you guys are perfect for this topic. I have a lot of questions about it. I'm sure everybody else does. This is being recorded. So Ken, for instance, if you've still got your camera on. So if you didn't want to be seen on there, just turn your camera off. Please make sure you're muted, and you'll be able to download this later on if you're furiously scribbling notes down. You don't need to. So Andrew, why don't you share your screen with us and we'll get going. I'll be turning off my camera and microphone, and Callum and I will be back at the end of the presentation to deal with the Q&A session.
Fantastic.
Andy, over to you.
Thanks, Rick. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. So hopefully everyone can now see the artificial intelligence slide in front of us. If anyone does not, good. Please put, terrific. Any questions and queries, you can put them in the chat section, or you can wait until the Q&A. I'm going to go through for 45 minutes this particular part, and then we'll go into open space where we can ask questions, and hopefully we have some answers. I will be here along with Callum and Rick and Becky after 1 o'clock. So if the discussion continues on, that's fine. Please do hang around for that. So webinar was originally entitled How Will Artificial Intelligence Help Security Practitioners? And what I want to do here is really focus on how AI today can be applied rather than necessarily looking at how things are going to be in the future. At the very end, I'm going to touch on artificial intelligence in the future. In other words, what do I think the path is over the next 12 months? But for the time being, what I'm going to try and do is go through some real life use cases which are directly applicable to organizations in the security space today. And we'll have a look at some of the challenges that one has with AI and how successful it can be. So we're going to have a look at first at how AI works, and then we're going to look at incident predictions, whether or not we can use AI as an intelligence analyst, how to use AI to analyze the public's response, and finally, communication and visualization. So how does AI work? I have introduced this slide as an introduction to some of the key terms for artificial intelligence. At the very top there, we have the overarching term artificial intelligence, which just basically means a program that can sense, reason, act, and adapt. Then many of you would have heard the term machine learning. That's been around for a lot longer than the following deep learning term. And machine learning is an algorithm whose performance improves over time and as it digests more data. Finally, we have a subset of machine learning called deep learning, and this uses multi-layered neural networks that learns from vast amounts of data. And deep learning neural networks is what I'm going to use as an explanation for how artificial intelligence works. So we're going to start off here with an image from surveillance video coverage. And I wanted to start off with something that's familiar to all of us. So we'll all probably be familiar with the notion of a camera picking up this image. And what we have here is a gentleman with a hood up who could be looking for the next train or potentially could be about to trespass. So the question is, what can AI do to be able to capture this? Now, traditionally, we had analytics in this space, which would be able to pick up an individual like this and be able to say there's an individual there. So with artificial intelligence, how might this work? If we apply a neural network, we would take this individual and the input to the neural network would be the question, please identify whether or not this is a person. And if it is a person, clearly we'd probably want an alert before the individual trespasses. This diagram here is one you might see in the future a lot more. It's indicative of a neural network. Blue circles are on the left, the input layer and the output layer over to the right. And then the orange circles represent different hidden layers within the neural network. And these are all interconnected. It is made to mimic how the human brain works. So where previously we'd be familiar with using a software product, if we typically type in X and we expect to get out Y, we will always get Y as an output. However, with neural networks, the way that it works is different to a standard piece of code. It uses different weightings for all of these different nodes to be able to detect and perform an action. So in this case, we would have different areas of the different layers focused on different elements. So can we recognize legs? Because legs are normally required to recognize a human that stood up. Yes. Can we recognize a body? Yes. Can we recognize arms? Yes. Can we recognize face? Well, in this case, we have a hood, so there is no face, in which case we might get an output which is uncertain. In this case, we would take the output and then put the image back into the neural network and train it to recognize individuals who have something covering up their face. That could be a hood, it could be a face mask. Now that process could potentially be extremely long-winded. And when it comes to us humans, it's taken us millennia to develop our brains. The thing that's really moved things forward in the AI space is the way that neural networks can get trained and improve their performance rapidly. So think of it as human evolution, trial and error, which is exactly what's happened with us. So we might at some point have had a third arm, but that wasn't very useful, so we dismissed that, and people that had a third arm died. I'm using an exaggerated example. So it's a kind of trial and error, survival of the fittest. the trial and error evolution has been accelerated with neural networks. And the way that they have accelerated is that now they are capable of doing some pretty impressive things, and they're becoming more and more like humans. But the important thing to note here is a neural network is different to a standard piece of code. The inputs will not always equal the standard outputs that we might expect. So just for an offset to kick us off, if we are using a large language model, yes, they are powerful, but the output always needs to be verified. I'm not talking here just about hallucinations. I'm talking about if you ask it the same question a number of times, it will likely have different answers. One way of thinking of it is it's a little like a powerful autocorrect. It is guessing the next word. Therefore, when we're using a large language model, we need to be mindful. We need to verify its output. I'm now going to go into things proper and have a look at different case studies of artificial intelligence and its application in this space. And I wanted to bring up the following 3 points before I do that. Number one, everything that we're talking about here is sourced from the UK. The UK is one of the most, if not the most, open source data rich environment. So therefore, that's a really good place to start. And also, we are using examples from the public space. We've chosen public space examples because they're all things that are relatable to the audience. If I were to choose a chemical plant, perhaps none of you, or only some of you, have an experience of a chemical plant, and therefore that wouldn't be so relatable. So that's just a note about the different case studies we're going to bring up. Let's look now at incident predictions. This is the big promise. The Minority Report with Tom Cruise, many of you will recall Tom Cruise and the Minority Report, able to predict crime before it happens. Is it going to be possible? And can we predict bad things happening? So in this particular case study, we had a major landowner with a consistent problem with antisocial behavior. And they were deploying staff to address this behavior, but they were asking the question, could AI do a better job than what we're doing at the moment, which is effectively looking at some reports and then deciding to send people there using hunches and best guess. When we spoke to this particular client, we were given over 7,000 reports, which sounds very, very promising. So that's a good number of reports. However, we were then told the 7,000 reports extended over 50 different locations. So the number of reports per location was a lot less than 7,000. And then the time against which those reports were recorded was over several years. So those 7,000 reports over several years, over 50 locations, ended up being something like an average of 20 reports per location. And that kind of number of reports is not sufficient to be able to make really good, accurate predictions. So here we have time, we have space, and we have reports. These 3 variables are very important. The volume of reports was high, but put over a large time, put over a large space, it isn't really sufficient. So when we're thinking about, can we predict what's going to happen next, it's important to think about how narrow the use case is. The narrower and the shorter period of time we're focused on, the easier it will be to achieve it. There's another thing that something like this drives, and that is a certain sort of response. So when we get lots of reports, such as 20 per location, we tend to do something called the survivor bias. So we all suffer from this. Survivor bias is where effectively we are responding to those that survive. So the example we have here, some of you will be familiar with this, is a Second World War bomber. So the red dots on the bomber represent bullet holes where anti-aircraft fire has penetrated the skin of the aircraft. At the start of World War II, aircraft would return home and land, and then the engineers on the ground would look at where the bullet holes were and quickly put additional armor in place to stop the bullet holes penetrating the skin. The aircraft would then go out to fly, and they found that those aircraft with those additional armor, they didn't come back. They still were failing in their missions just as much as other planes, and they were scratching their heads trying to work out what was going on. The problem we have here is that the planes that were failing to survive and failing to make it back to the airstrips had been shot in those areas where we don't see the bullet holes. So the response of the engineers on the ground was completely logical, and that was to respond where they're being hit. But in actual fact, if we zoom out for a second and think about the entirety of all the different events that were happening, it's only the people that were making their planes come back and reporting the particular instance of being shot that drove the response. And that's kind of what we see happening here with this particular example of antisocial behavior. People were responding to the reports that they get back. In other words, most people in the world of security and resilience will be asking for reports by exception. They're saying to somebody, if something bad happens, I want to know about it. If, however, in this particular case, in this antisocial behavior case study, if the client had gone out and done something called positive reporting, so in other words, was there any antisocial behavior at these venues at say 10 a.m., at 11 a.m., at 12 noon, at 1 o'clock, and they got positive reports to say nothing was happening at this time, nothing was happening at this time, then the data set would be far larger and the accuracy of any prediction would be far greater. So this is a really important key theme that runs throughout today's session, and that is to make sure one thinks about the way that one produces one's reports. And of course, as managers, we probably want to get reports by exception, but question, are we asking our staff to also use positive reporting and record things when things are okay? Additionally, our other recommendation is if you haven't got sufficient data, start small and start with just simply trending the information that you have. The next step might be a more advanced statistical model. It might be something like regression analysis, but to jump straight into the world of AI will have very often a hurdle rate which is too high to be able to get predictions. There is a report of a Korean research institute being able to predict crime within, I think it was 82% accuracy. And I'll have a slide on that in the annex. And if anyone wants to know about that particular case, then please send me a message and I can tell you about that particular report. But otherwise, incident predictions, super difficult to do. Can you improve on trends? Answer yes, but really what it comes down to the quality of the reporting systems that you have in place. Let's move on now to intelligence analysts. How can an intelligence analyst be aided by artificial intelligence? Here we were engaged by an intelligence provider and they asked us to supplement the existing staff, save the staff time, and produce more timely reports. So
Andrew, hold on a second. I just muted because some people just came in unmuted. I've just muted everybody and I've accidentally muted you as well, but I can't unmute you. Sorry, mate. Can you unmute yourself? Thanks. You should be good.
hello again.
Yep. Sorry, my fault.
No worries. Okay. So were we at intelligence analyst, Rick? Okay. So I'm going to
I think your screen sharing, is it? I know you're up. Okay, mate. Sorry, I'm off.
Okay. So I want to go back to the start of the intelligence analyst piece. If anybody thinks, if I missed anything else and I was on mute, please let me know and I shall revert back. Let's take a look at intelligence analyst. So in this case, we were engaged by a human intelligence provider to introduce AI to their staff. So can AI help supplement existing staff? Can it save them time? And can it produce more timely reports? One of the things we looked at was taking some instant reports, such as this here. So this is an instant report which we've made up, and it's about a fictitious date, Tuesday the 30th of December 2025, when a group called Anti-Democracy destroy lighting around a number of businesses in Edinburgh. So just to give you an example of what one can do here, we have an incident report come through. This might be a free text field. It might be an incident report contained within a very large PDF or PowerPoint. And what we want to do is know some answers to some key questions for us to be able to digest that. So let's take a look at a video here of us uploading that incident report and putting it into a large language model. And some of the writing is very small, but just to give you some idea, I've typed into the large language model, I've instructed it, telling it, you're a security analyst. So one tip whenever using a large language model is to instruct it about the role that it's taking, and it's more likely then to respond in kind. So I've asked it to tell us about, from the report, what, when, where, why, who, and how. And if you can see that, it's done a very good job analysing that unstructured report and putting it into a structure and a format which is much easier to read. So a large language model can be deployed quite successfully in these kind of scenarios. So how would one then do that? How would one automate the entire process? We'd have something like magic email, which effectively means you have an email account set up, and the AI will take from those emails different types of documents. That will be automated. It would move into a large language model. The larger language model will then look at some key information within that report, and it will go out to the internet and trusted sources to verify that the information is correct. So for example, is Tuesday a day? Yes, it is. Fine. Okay, I'll continue to use the word Tuesday. So it can verify, it won't share the information with the internet, but it will verify key information with the internet. And then after that, it will produce a report, which we just saw a moment ago. The advantage of that is that, for example, I could have the last 24 hours reports coming into me, and I would have an email on my desk at 7 a.m. every morning detailing maybe every single report or an aggregation of the reports. So one of the thoughts that one might have is, with all of the existing intelligence that you have, all the incident reports, if you're putting it all into a large language model, you're also putting it into a database, and then the large language model can look back and provide insights and analysis on that information. So for example, if I process an entire year's worth of information each day, I input 2 or 3 reports. By the end of the year, I could look back at it and ask the large language model, tell me how many incidents happened within, for example, Edinburgh? How many happened on a Tuesday? What are the common tactics of different protest groups, etc., etc.? So at the moment, what we found with the provider we are working with is that there was a lot of effort going in to produce reports, but the reports then weren't being stored and structured and then analysed post-event. And there's a real win there, really quite straightforward win, to keep your data, keep your information, sorry, and be able to do some analysis on it. Recommendations when it comes to doing something like this with an intelligence analyst. It's always important to have human oversight, so make sure that any output is labelled AI generated, so we don't act without verification. And remember to try and trust it less than a human. If I ask Rick, what did he have for dinner yesterday? He might say pie and mash. If the next day I ask him, what did you have for dinner 2 days ago? He might say mash and pie. And that's the same thing that we're going to get from a large language model. We'll get the same response very often, but put in different ways. So there is a reliability factor which we need to keep in mind when we're using these models. Section 4, analysis of the public's response. Can we use artificial intelligence to help us analyze the public's response? In this case, we had a client who wanted to know, during an incident crisis, can social media be used to provide live updates, to be able to provide messages and give us something on approval rating? So approval rating is something we're probably more familiar with in elections, and Prime Minister, President, or whomever, their approval rating goes up or down. And very often in social media, there's something called sentiment analysis. So there, the analysis would be focused on the different terms and phrases used to describe a particular person, in this case an organization, and from that you can detect sentiment, positive or negative or neutral. So social media, that whole space, back in 2018, a few years ago now, back in 2018, this was a really exciting space to work in. Back in 2018, MIT and Sabanci University were able to produce a piece of research which allowed them to say they were able to predict protests with a 75% average prediction rate, which is pretty impressive stuff. This was focused on the anti-Donald Trump, he's not my president protests over in the US. However, in that same year, some of you remember an organization called Cambridge Analytica. And there was a big scandal around Cambridge Analytica using personal identifiable information from social media platforms and then reselling that to political parties which can further their political aims. We then had people like Mark Zuckerberg, etc., hauled up in front of Congress. And what we eventually saw was a total lockdown on access to social media. So since 2018, even though we did some follow-up research on this, we've found that the amount of information that's accessible is highly restricted. Not only that, in 2022, we had a person called Elon Musk take over Twitter. What he found is a failing media organization, but potentially a pot of gold with lots of data. He realized that potentially we can use all of this data and all of these tweets to be able to help train AI. And as a result, Elon Musk started to charge for access to tweets. So we have a commercialization of tweets. So 1 million tweets as of, I think, 48 hours ago cost $5,000. And an enterprise version, in other words, where you start to access a real serious volume of tweets, costs $42,000 per calendar month. So clearly now it's becoming quite costly to access social media. In addition, the social media landscape has changed significantly. We're probably all familiar with these icons here to the left, but now we have many, many more options. These are just a few of the different options people can use to have a community online. Threads at the top there is Meta's response to Twitter. Blue Sky is the founder of Twitter's alternative to Twitter. We have TikTok and Snapchat, which are focused on a certain age group. And then we have people that have set up things like Signal and Telegram, which are focused on closed security and people can't access that. So the social media world, the entire landscape has changed. We've gone from open and free to closed, to fractured, and to expensive. Therefore, whenever we work with people now, one of the things we make clear is that high volume is expensive. To access serious scale and surface new and emerging information is an expensive exercise, and most people will not therefore be willing to pay that price. We recommend that people follow trusted and verified accounts, and we saw that particularly here in the UK during the 2024 riots. There was a large amount of disinformation put online. And as a result, we find a lot more people using trusted and verified accounts. So where AI can be used successfully is to be deployed to plug into certain accounts and follow those accounts legitimately with an API through something like Twitter, all very above board and all very transparent. And then when certain messages do appear on there, that would then be relayed to the client. And of course, you can always still use a company account. In other words, if you're an organization like Coca-Cola, you still will have your different accounts for Coca-Cola, and you can do the analysis of people's response to that account. In short, our recommendation about using AI in the public space for using response to a crisis, we now recommend people use verified sources to replace the volume of sources. So look at less, but look at higher quality sources. Those high quality sources are inevitably going to be slower because they have humans producing them, and that human will verify the information before producing it. We're talking about accounts such as the Met Police, etc. And of course, they will be much more narrow. So they will be responding to very specific incidents. So therefore, the capacity to surface new emerging threats is a lot more limited unless you're willing to invest large sums of money on a big scale. Final section I wanted to touch on is communication and visualization, because even though we might have a great deal of information now being generated by artificial intelligence and read by artificial intelligence, the question then is, how on earth do we communicate all of that information to other people and to other parties? So we were engaged by a large organization to look at how information can be communicated to peers, to staff, and ultimately to the exec. Now here we have a large language model, and I've got another example here of me typing into a large language model a query, and in this case I have uploaded a data set around the topic of antisocial behavior, and I have asked it, who records the most antisocial behavior? And there I've also asked it to visualize that. And here the large language model has produced something that I like to refer to as magic. It has produced a visualization out of thin air, which is actually quite impressive and really quite helpful. And it shows us who has recorded the most antisocial behavior incidents according to the data set which I uploaded to it. Now, this is really good for a one-off query. Large language models have the advantage that we normal humans don't need to learn a software package to be able to interact with a bunch of data. We can type in through natural language a query and it will bring back a response. But there's a couple of challenges here. Number one, the quality of your query defines the quality of the output. And I have often used our own large language model incorrectly. It will take me 3 to 5 times sometimes to get it correct. I'll hand this over to someone like Callum and he'll get it right first time because his brain is framed to think in a logical way as the larger language model would think. So there is some upskilling and training that one needs if one is using a large language model to ensure that we know that our prompts, that's what we're typing in, the queries, are the right kind of prompts to get the right response. It's very easy to put in a poor prompt, get a quick answer, act on that, and of course that's often the wrong thing to do because the answer is incorrect. But you wouldn't know because you're not talking to a human being, it's just giving you a response. The second thing to say is around visualizations like this. They're good now, but in a couple of weeks, if I ask the same question with the same data set, will the visualization be a bar chart like this? The answer is, because it's always learning and developing, possibly no. So the answer is a one-off. It's good for a one-off query, but if we're really being serious around something like data visualization and communication, we need to put some effort and some investment, time and money into data visualization. Data visualizations have been a hot topic for a very long time now, because here, for example, we have a great example of data visualization gone wrong. This is a real life example from 48 hours ago. If I looked at our data visualization of all of the roadworks that are happening in England, we have over 25,000 ongoing roadworks in England, which is a huge amount of information. And if I then wanted to occupy a map like this, you can see that even if I made these icons super small, the entirety of the English Isle would be pretty pointless and I couldn't see what was going on. So I'm going to show you a video of a good piece of data science and a good piece of data visualization about what we could do with information like that. So here, for example, we've got 25,000 different icons, but if I hover over one icon, it's showing me what's in that space. If I zoom in, I'm hovering over another icon, it shows me how many are in that space and what space that occupies. And you'll see that this is a really clever way of viewing a lot of data over a space of England, and yet I'm able to zoom in and see exactly what I need to see, and at no time the map get too busy. So eventually we reach down to street level, and if I do an on click, I see pump lane at street level. So we might have lots of artificial intelligence deployed, but part of a project in artificial intelligence is to think then, so what is the outcome? How does one to visualize that? And it's important to make sure one invests sufficient time and energy and money in the data visualization. Otherwise you have a lot of data, but not a lot of sense. So we recommend one that standardizes the means of communication. Ensure that you and your colleagues agree upon how this information is to be communicated among yourselves, and invest time in data visualization. Changing bar charts, changing maps, etc. throughout the course of the year only causes confusion. You really need to get to a certain line, draw it in the sand, and standardize your communication medium. Conclusion. The best way to think about artificial intelligence as a helicopter view is using the 3 following words: describe, predict, prescribe. As we move from 1 to 3, things get more and more difficult. Number 1 is describe. Its capacity to describe something and provide insight. So that is looking back on time, for example, looking at ASB and saying where these things are happening and when they are happening. Then we start to get a little bit more tricky and we move into prediction. This is foresight. There is genuinely an opportunity to apply artificial intelligence and predict with greater accuracy than most humans. But clearly there are data practices that need to be in place. And then finally, number 3, prescribe. This is the promised land for all of artificial intelligence. This is where everyone wants to head to. And this is focused around the idea that now we know this information, now we know this is going to happen tomorrow, we are now going to send 5 individuals to this place. And you as a human can let AI do all of that for you. So this is an action model, and it's focused around the idea of having something called AI agents, which some of you would have heard about already, and you'll hear a lot more about in the future. And you've got large organizations like Google being able to deploy AI agents, and they're able to take over your cursor on your screen and then move around your PC and do things like book holidays for you. And it will learn what are your preferences, and you can reject it, and then you can learn to do other subtasks such as that. So that's where a lot of the money is being ploughed into. It is the action side of artificial intelligence and the opportunity for artificial intelligence to start doing things. And that's where potentially some of the fear is around artificial intelligence taking people's jobs. Our final conclusion and recommendation then is, if you are to adopt artificial intelligence, try to have an open mind and be iterative, experimental, and try to also be prudent. In other words, don't oversell the prospects of the project in advance and bring it right back down to earth and try and move through things through particular milestones. Prepare to change your current report practices. So having positive reporting in place is a real big win. And then finally, if you want to get closer to AI, there is really no better way of getting closer to AI and understanding it than actually launching an AI project yourself, getting involved with people internally or getting involved with people like us. And one will soon realize how quite straightforward some of the elements of an AI project can be, not all of it, but some of it. And then one can really talk about artificial intelligence with a great deal more knowledge and confidence. Finally, for ASC members, we are offering a free trial. So if anyone is interested in getting involved immediately with an AI project, they can find me here. You can get to our website for the first QR code there. The second QR code will take you to my LinkedIn account. There is my email address, and there is my telephone number. Rick, back over to you. I shall leave the slide sharing at the moment, and then I shall disable it in a second.
Brilliant, Andy, brilliant. I've got like 4 pages of notes myself. What I really want to hear from is the 86 people that have joined us for this from all over the world. And you know, I wasn't expecting the guys to join us from the IAPSC in the USA, because it's really early in the morning there. But there's a good number of them actually have joined in, and we're really pleased to see you. This is all part of the collaborative work that the ASC is building with the PSSA and with our US partners and you know, and everybody else, because stronger together. I think Callum, are you there? Let's get Callum up on screen as well, because Andrew obviously is the owner of Serve. Callum is the technologist who actually can answer some of the technology questions. I know a number of you on this will have a higher level of technical competence, and it would be great to get those questions answered. So, Callum, are you there?
Even if he, because I know his camera is off, but his camera is
off. Okay, right. So, I mean, I think I would like to open the debate here, because a number of the things that you talked about around use and trust and positive reporting and how we use it fits with some research that I was looking into in preparation for this that came from Salesforce through Slack. Slack is an instant messaging system that's used for productivity. It's arguably an AI sort of service, but Salesforce did some research and realized that everybody in a workplace generally fits into one of 5 different categories of AI user. So Andrew's heard this before because we went through it earlier, but there is the maximalist. That is the person that is using AI prolifically in their day-to-day work, and it's ingrained, weaved in what they do in their work life. There is the underground user, and that is the person that uses AI, but they don't tell anybody they're using it because they feel like it's cheating. And I find that extraordinary, but I get it, because I think the older users may not want to let people know they're using it because it might seem like they're cheating or it's lazy. There is the rebel. The rebel is the person that will never use it. I do things this way. I'm not changing the way I do things. And if you do use it, you're cheating. And it's not fair that my co-workers should be allowed to use AI when I'm not using it. That's the rebel. Then there's the observer. That's generally, I think, me. I'm interested in it, but I'm waiting to see how it evolves. And then I will probably adopt it when I see, how it becomes more prolific. And then there's the super fan, which it may be a lot of you. The super fan is, they are really excited about what AI is going to bring to productivity, but they don't know how to use it and how to ingrain it into life. And I think is there anything else, Andy, Callum, that, are there other users you've come across that don't fit into one of those categories? What do you think of that sort of mentality?
Yeah, thanks, Rick. I think the idea of personas is helpful when thinking about use cases. There's the classic Geoffrey Moore technology curve, where you have the idea of the innovator, who is the person as the first adopter that doesn't mind things going wrong. And culturally, working within an organization, I think it's important to have an innovator's hat on, at least, because things are going to go wrong with a project using artificial intelligence initially, right? Because bad inputs, bad output. So I think it's useful, particularly with consumers, but I think in a business context, we are focused on tasks. And so you might have an imprudence person, you might have a prudence person, you might have an individual whose disposition is severely conservative. But once they see the win, and effectively it's saving them some time or it's saving them some money, in a business environment, I think we find that those personal dispositions are moved to one side because there's normally a imperative driven by a set of KPIs. So I think it's useful, it's very interesting, but I'm not so sure it translates fully over into the world of business.
I think that actually touches on a point that I'd read in the FT about this, the idea that the executive urgency for adoption of AI to increase productivity is being counterbalanced by the employees' reluctance to uptake this new technology, and that they are investing so heavily and spending so much money on trying to get a competitive advantage, and they may be overspending because there are new platforms such as the DeepSeek R1, which is cheaper than bigger LLMs, and the things that Meta and Anthropic and OpenAI are spending massive amounts on on technology, when actually now the Chinese have released something that's less sophisticated, but seems to be producing a disproportionate amount of quality, but far less. And I don't know what I mean, maybe both of you got an opinion on this, but it fits with what Charlie Frank has just put into the questions. And he says, do you see AI more as an asset to the security industry over a growing threat to, well, industry, I think, not just security? So where do you see the likes of, DeepSeek R1 being more openly available, but then the threats that might be realized? Because, AI has opportunities, but like everything, it comes with threats as well.
Yeah, so I'll answer that first, and I'll hand over to Callum, who can talk a little bit more about how you can use a large language model to elicit ends. But there's clearly the capacity to generate, for example, multi-language formats now using AI. So where before you might have to have a translator, you can use AI to generate images. It can translate into different languages. So propaganda, for terrorist purposes, for example, is far easier. So it's clear that there is a productivity improvement through using AI. There is also on the horizon, I've seen flagged up a question, because a number of technology products that are going to be released now are going to be actually mostly built by AI, by people that are relying on AI to build the product, which means the products themselves could have significant vulnerabilities, because AI has lowered the bar to generate good images, generate good text, and to code. So there is clearly a vulnerability there going forward that we need to be alive to much more. But for the opportunity to download an LLM and use that for illicit purposes, I'll hand over to Callum, and I'll mute myself.
Yeah, so hopefully you can hear me there.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, to your point of do you see it as being a benefit or being a threat? I think I definitely see it as a benefit, because in a lot of industries, but definitely in the security industry, you can only take action when you've got some form of data to act on. And I think especially if you're a provider who has a very large footprint, then you're going to have a huge amount of data. And one of the real big benefits of AI is the ability to sort of ingest all of that data and process it. So whereas previously, you go back, I was going to say, 20 years, but even 10, and some people are still on that system of just recording things on paper. To go through all of that data would be next to an impossible task. But by bringing in these AI systems, it allows you to ingest and process and give actionable data from all of it. So while I think there is some concerns on AI, being a threat, I think the benefits that the security industry will see from it far outweigh that.
Yeah, and ooh, there we go. Thank you, Callum. Tim Moore just put a comment in, which I think is a wider debate. Given the history of Chinese intelligence, should we be worried about DeepSeek? Personally, I think it's early days. It's had a 3% drop on the US stock exchange in certain aspects, but it hasn't massively damaged the chip manufacturers or the bigger more complex AI platforms like OpenAI. They'll continue to work on bigger data, but it's like you might have the Maseratis and the Bugattis of AI, and now this is a little sort of Daewoo, really cheap but usable system. But people have to draw their own conclusions as to what they use it for. Now, if you're going to be putting critical national infrastructure and trying to build policies or giving information into that, even though you can access DeepSeek offline, when you go back online for it to refresh, it's going to suck that. You have to assume it's going to suck that out of what you've done. So just, I think with any AI system, if you're using it, think about what the data security means and how much you're giving away in it. And if you wouldn't say it out loud or post it on social media, I wouldn't put it into the platform. I think that's a good rule of thumb for the time being. And I think actually, Andy, one of the things that was on the FT research around AI was that, and to my point before, that AI is a tool. And you said it yourself, don't trust AI. In fact, I think you said trust what did you say? You put
trust it less than a person.
Yeah, trust it less than a person. I think that's a really good piece of advice, because you have to verify the information because it's not perfect, and the caveats on the systems say that, but trust it less than a person. And funny enough, I took the top 5 blockers to the use of AI. So it said generative AI is to be harnessed for productivity, but the things that are getting in the way is data security. That's #1 worry for all users: data security and privacy, and how that is used, which comes to the point that Tim Moore made. AI reliability and accuracy. I think that comes to the point we just made about not trusting it necessarily. A lack of expertise and a skills gap amongst staff is a big concern for companies that want to leverage this for productivity. So I'm going to ask a question later on about following up on that. Ethical and compliance issues, I think that's a big deal. And when it comes back to a number of things that you talked around misinformation, and there is a piece of work that was conducted about 4 years ago by Dr. Elizabeth Seeger, who worked, and these are long words now, the Cambridge University's Centre for Existential Risk did a piece of work that was called epistemic security risk. So epistemology is how people assimilate information and then cross-reference it. So it's a human behavior. Epistemology is about human behavior, and the risk is that these days, generation, the next generation, with Generation Y and the post millennials, they are getting their sources of information from large language models, AI, all the ones you put up, TikTok still, Snapchat, Discord. They're getting their information from these platforms, and they're believing it straight away without looking at, and that gives an opportunity for large amount of bots to steer people's opinions towards propaganda, whether that's a fake news or whatever it is. I think there is a risk that if we don't question AI, we can be railroaded in a propaganda sense to believe things that are not actually true. And that came to your point, Andrew, about verifying your information and so on. So a couple of questions coming in. I just want to, Nicholas Gadget put down, learning from mistakes is important. He refers to the old video cassette recorders downfall because they put too much into a single product. I think Kodak did the same. They didn't evolve. So where do you think evolution of AI is going, and how on it should we be as businesses?
Yeah, so thank you. Thanks, Rick. Where do I think AI is going? Well, no one knows, basically, and predictions are difficult, particularly about the future, as a very famous physicist once said. The investments will be focused on where the greatest return is, and that is particularly around the idea of technology being cheaper to deploy than humans and more reliable. They don't have holidays, they don't take breaks, etc. So already one can see certain tasks and certain roles being performed by it. And whenever I talk to people about artificial intelligence at the moment, if one looks at standard image generation or video generation, if you went to use stock photography for a presentation, for example, always the stock photography was pretty awkward and horrible. And to be honest with you, no photographer was particularly enamored with that. But now that AI can do that, what you'll find is that a lot of people that are okay at their jobs or kind of okay-ish, a lot of those roles will be replaced because AI will be good enough. So my primary purpose when I put together a presentation is not to have the best cover photo ever. It is to have an image of a person doing X, Y, or Z. So I will never go out and spend £2,000 on a cover artist, make up an image for a slide. So already you can see an erosion in certain spaces where certain roles that are being performed to an okay level are being replaced right now. And that's the same for copywriting, etc., etc. So I think it will be interesting to see how the creative industry responds, particularly with things like artwork and music and film, because clearly there's a lot of interruption and disruption potential in that particular space. But ultimately what we're seeing right now is the deployment of AI agents as a response to the huge investment that's going into AI, to be able to say to the organizations, the investors, we are now deploying AI agents that can do things which previously we perhaps would have a personal assistant do, and these things can do them on our behalf. And the secondary impact of that, which people don't quite recognize, not everybody yet, is you might go to a favorite website at the moment to book your holiday. If you are now using AI to book your holiday, what website is it going to? Because that website that was built for me as a human. It now needs to be built for AI. So you'll have an entire new space of like dark websites, which are built up specifically to meet the needs of artificial intelligence. So that's quite a different landscape from what we've had before. You go to lastminute.com, you go to booking.com. How are they going to adapt and respond to automated AI agents going out and booking holidays? That's my response, and I'll hand over to Callum. Sorry, Rick, go on.
No, I was just going to throw in a link here, because what you just said just reminded me of the National Protective Security Authority in the UK, NPSA, our technical authority from government, has a tool that you can use that will take an uploaded picture. So it's called Think Before You Link. I'm going to put it into the chat now. If you Google NPSA Think Before You Link, AI generated photographs or stock images. So let's say somebody connects with you on LinkedIn and you're like, this looks suspicious, a business opportunity, it just doesn't look right, name doesn't fit, photo looks stock image. You can upload that photograph into a reverse AI, and it'll tell you if it's stock generated, and then gives you a list of questions to help you understand whether that profile on LinkedIn is real or not. And it will let you protect yourself so you can engage with, with that question we talked about before. Don't trust it necessarily. Go and check it out. So I definitely recommend having a look at Think Before You Link for that. And then, Callum, what I would like you to, because we're running out of time, is there's a question by Nick earlier about, should we, where is it now? God, we got loads of questions coming in. Should we adopt security AI into a closed business environment first, meaning steer away from open source? But what I think I would like to ask you in that sense is, how can I start to bring AI into my business safely? So if you could sort of cover that off, that would be great.
Yeah, so I think to the original question, a closed environment is definitely the way to go. So if you are querying sites such as ChatGPT, the new DeepSeek, they will store that data, which obviously in the security industry is a no-go. So what we look for is a closed environment, and the way that you can do that is by taking open source models. So Meta have an open source model, which is Llama. So they've got a variety of them depending on the input. Is it visual? Is it text? Different sizes, so the number of parameters within the model. will determine how good it is. So what you can do with those open source models is you can effectively download them and host them on a closed environment. So while at the moment the open source models, i.e. Llama, are not as good as the premium models from ChatGPT, they are still really good. And so you can effectively get all of the functionality from the LLMs that we're used to, but in a closed environment where you have full control over the data, and you aren't you aren't exposing it to the outside world. And to Tim's point, I think it was Tim earlier on the DeepSeek. I think in the whole landscape of LLMs, we're hitting a point now where we're seeing a plateau in performance. So while a lot's being made that DeepSeek was better than ChatGPT's premium model, a pinch of salt to take with that is they benchmarked it themselves, which obviously they're going to try and cherry pick data to get the best benchmark. And also, while objectively it is better, the difference is very minor. And we're seeing that a lot now with these all these AI companies, is they're sort of pushing for that 0.5% gain. So we're not seeing that sort of accelerated growth from, say, ChatGPT's their original GPT-2 model to where they are now with 4.0 and the O1 model. That was a huge jump, but sort of now we're sort of hitting the limit of the current architecture. So a lot of it's based on transformers. So I think until we see a new architecture coming out of the research or coming from these big companies, which sort of completely change how these models are built, we won't see a very big jump. So while, yes, DeepSeek is performing better according to their benchmarks, and it is a lot more efficient than the ChatGPT and such, we're sort of seeing them being quite level in terms of performance, which is also a good thing, as I've talked about with the open source models. So currently the proprietary models are doing better than open source, but because we've sort of hit that plateau, we're starting to see these open source models reaching that level of performance where you now don't have to worry about the concerns of exposing your data. You can have essentially all of the functionality in a closed environment, which is exactly what you want in a security industry.
Yeah, I think, Callum, stay on there a second, because I think I'm going to ask Andy to address Kay Chan's question in a second. But the one above from Ahmed asks, how can it harm us? Now, my personal opinion, before I hand this to you, is, AI is a tool. It doesn't harm us. People that use it for nefarious or for criminal activity harm us, like cybercrime. A computer doesn't harm us, but a person with criminal intent will use it to harm us. What do you think are the maybe, let's say, the top two concerns you have in how AI may be used to commit crimes? And I've got my own opinions, but I'd like your take before I come back to Andy to address Kay Chan's question. Guys, I know we've gone over the time. Are you okay to stay on for maybe 10 minutes more to clear these questions? Yeah. Because I think it's really important debate right now. Yeah. Okay. So we will stay open for those that want to stay on and listen. We'll push this recording on beyond the hour. Thanks, Callum.
Yeah. So to your point of how will AI affect crime, I think what we'll see is just a constant cat and mouse game. It's quite. You mentioned the point before about. I think being able to check if the link or someone's LinkedIn profile was real or AI generated. So we're already seeing that cat and mouse game where when sort of ChatGPT started to sort of really hit the mainstream, and a lot of students were doing homework or generating reports and essays using ChatGPT, tools came out to detect was it AI generated. But very soon afterwards, we saw the sort of anti-AI detection tool where it would figure out how are these AI detection tools working, what do they look for, and then it would change an AI-generated piece of work so that it would pass those tests. So I think in terms of crime, we'll definitely see that. I think we're seeing it now in terms of impersonating people, deep fakes. So those came out, and there's a lot of concern about that. And then you'll get tools that will be able to counteract that. But from my point of view, I think it is favoured a lot more towards anti-crime, because to commit crimes using AI, you have to use the available tools, which are generated by these companies. And as we're starting to see now, governments are sort of starting to get more involved and wanting to deploy them themselves. So while you'll see that sort of cat and mouse game, I think it is unlikely that the criminal aspect will overtake. I think they maybe have a small period where they'll come up with a new method, but I think that will very quickly be remedied.
Yeah, and I think there's the obvious CEO fraud is now more prolific, because we don't know that that we're actually talking to Andrew Tollinton. It could be an AI generated. It's very simple. You can search online how to do it, and even script kiddies now can create fake profiles. And if people are not aware of these threats, then they will be duped by it. And we know that in terms of cybersecurity, we have to expect that we will get breached. There will be a ransomware. Somebody will click a hyperlink. Well, now that situational awareness in digital threats has got to expand to AI. You have to question that if somebody pops up on a Teams call asking you to transfer money or to send this information here, and you weren't expecting it, verify it first. And there's, we are always catching up in terms of criminal behavior. We are always responding to the innovators that are the criminals. So you just have to be aware and make sure people are aware. I think that's the key thing from my perspective.
I think you're exactly right. It's not something we haven't seen before. When we sort of had the dawn of the internet age, at first people were extremely trusting, and then you start to see people taking advantage of it, scammers, criminals. So yeah, it's just having that awareness and having that sort of pause and thinking, okay, this looks legitimate, let me investigate it. And I think if you go out with the attitude of I'm just going to trust everything, I think AI is not going to be your main problem. I think you're going to come into problems regardless. So yeah, I think the level of verification you have to do now and due diligence has been raised. But I think going with that attitude of I'm going to do my due diligence. I'm going to be aware that this potentially could be a threat or a scam. So I think just having that awareness is still very important.
And so Kay's question, I think, is right in your ballpark. It kind of touches on a lot of what Serve does now. Do you want to take that question?
Yeah, thanks, Rick. So I've responded to Kay with a link which takes, so I'll put that in the chat. It's a very good example. It's a very good article about computer vision, video surveillance, and the difficulty we have with using the video surveillance for these kind of instances of, for example, spotting anomalies in a crowd. We had a client a couple of years back talk to us about, if you recall from the presentation, an image of an individual on a platform. So they had a number of these trespass events, but the total summation of the actual video clips available for that was less than 100. So less than 100 instances caught on video which one could analyze, which makes this kind of spotting anomalies through video surveillance very, very tricky. We don't specialize in computer vision. You'll find organizations around the world, lots of them will specialize in image technology. That's not our speciality. But to give you some idea about what can be done in that space, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again very briefly, just to show you one slide, which is in the annex of my presentation. And here I've got a sentence by coming from the Electronics and Telecommunications Research Institute. And I'm going to read it out for you in case people aren't sat in front of their screens. We have successfully developed a video security technology that uses CCTV information to predict and prevent the possibility of criminal activities, going beyond the simple detection of crime occurrence. Through this technology, we have laid the technical foundations that will allow us to take the leap to the next level and the development of a futuristic advanced social safety system. So there's a couple of things to note here. This article was publicized, or their research, sorry, was publicized in the autumn/winter of last year. And they had over 32,000 instances of criminality caught on CCTV. So that is 32,000 as opposed to, say, 100 instances. Now, they are claiming an 80% confidence of being able to predict a crime. So it might be behavior detection. They'll be using behavioral detection techniques. And what they're doing is they are combining crime statistics, which we work closely with, plus CCTV imaging to create this data set. But I think the most important thing to take from this is, in the sentence we have in front of us here, through this technology, we have now laid the technical foundation that will allow us. So this is not the art of the possible today. This is not something that's going to happen today. This is basically just more research, combining the data sets of crime where it happens, plus CCTV. They've been able to make a significant advance. So again, at the bottom there, Kim Jong-woo is the individual who was publicizing the Electronics and Telecommunications Research Institute work, and I'm sure they'd welcome any queries that you want to make directly to them. So in answer to the question, do we think that video surveillance will be able to pick up on anomalies, behavioral detection, etc.? It's getting a lot better. It's getting better all the time. And it's something that we should be mindful of, and I expect to see more advances in that space. But the challenge is the sheer scale that one has. I was at Imperial University very recently, and they were talking about the verification techniques used for landing a plane. And if you think about a plane landing on a runway, you have very, very, very few things in the way of an aircraft wheel landing apart from a line in the middle. So line, space, line, space, line, space. And there they have a very high level of confidence to be able to predict where the plane is going to land. You have a fixed camera, you have a fixed angle, you have a fixed environment upon which to land, and it's still not anywhere near to being 100%. So it's worth bearing in mind, you have lots and lots of data being captured in really narrow defined areas, and it's still not perfect. So being able to, for example, go to a Christmas market and detect anomalies, that's a much bigger challenge. And that is one that is beyond us at the moment, from my experience, although there could be other people out there that would say otherwise.
No, I concur. I think we are now at 10 past, and I've taken a lot of your time. I'm just going to answer a few of the questions here without asking any more. So the study that I mentioned before, I put the hyperlink into the chat box. It was in the FT. Follow the threads. You'll get to the Salesforce Slack research that was listed. It's all hyperlinked from that Financial Times article. And then Andy's put a hyperlink in there that answers some of this question. Or was it? And put it in there. So while we just wrap up, if you're interested in those, click and copy those hyperlinks. They're safe because we've already been in them. And then do your own research. This is just the beginning. These webinars will be designed to make you leave with more questions than you came with, because that's the key thing. Is we can't answer all your questions here, but we can start the juices going in the brain to get you out researching. It's for you to then learn more and spread more within your own area. I think AI is with us. Obviously, we're in the fourth industrial revolution. The connectivity of technology and humans. This is the biggest leap forward since the industrial revolution, and we have to embrace it because we're all wearing it. And there's no doubt that it's listening to me right now even though I've turned it on to theatre mode. But what I've got to, oh, Dariojo. Dariojo, you have obviously missed us by an hour. I'm sorry about that. Everybody will get a link to this. You can find it on the Association of Security Consultants YouTube channel, so you can refresh back on it. If you have any more burning questions that weren't answered here, or you think about them later, Andy and Callum are members with the ASC. Their email was up earlier on. You can link with them through us. And so all there is left to do is to say thank you to you guys. It was a brilliant presentation. We really value your engagement with the ASC and having the PSSA and our American friends on, and everybody from across the world in between. We appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you next time. Guys, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Superb. Enjoy the rest of your day, evening. Bye for now.